Welcome to Staying Connected, a podcast where I talk to other people about their stories with VEDS or vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Staying Connected. This is your host, Katie, and before we get into the show, I want to remind you that the views, information, and opinions in these podcasts are those of the individuals involved and do not represent the opinions of the Marfan Foundation. The Marfan Foundation is not responsible for and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in them, nor does the information constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This show is not produced by or affiliated with the Marfan Foundation or the VEDS Movement. I hope you all enjoyed our last episode featuring John Kyle, a man with VEDS living in St. Petersburg, Florida, who has two kids that also have VEDS. Today, we're going to talk to Karen DeCoursey, who lives in North Carolina and finally got some answers when she was diagnosed with VEDS after a family member was. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your story on the show. I really appreciate it, and I loved talking with you. Let's go ahead and go to the interview. Hey Karen, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and sharing your story with us. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody who's listening?
Sure, Katie. Thanks for having me today. My name is Karen DeCoursey, and I'm so happy to be here today to share my story with everybody out there to raise awareness.
So where are you? How old are you, if you're okay with sharing that? And when were you diagnosed with VEDS?
Of course. Right now, I'm living in North Carolina. I'm originally from New Jersey. I've been here about 8 years. I turned 46 this past January, and I was diagnosed. It will be now going on 4 years. So it was just 4 years, actually. So 17 was when I got diagnosed, 2017.
That's when I got diagnosed as well.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Same year. So how were you diagnosed? How did that come up?
So my brother was the first one to be diagnosed in our family. And because, he wanted all of us to be aware, and because of our father dying at such an early age of an aortic aneurysm, he really encouraged the rest of the family. There's 5 children that my father had to be, tested as well. And we did. And my diagnosis, let's see. So I got tested pretty shortly thereafter, and I was confirmed VEDS on March of 2017. And that was probably, I think he was October of the prior year. So yeah, so not long after him.
So when you got that diagnosis, did it make sense? Was it something that, like, when you first heard about it for him, that you thought you might have, or how did all of that feel?
So when my brother was first diagnosed, for whatever reason, he and his son were also positive for VEDS. And being that my father was also probably had a diagnosis of that, but being that he passed in 86, we will never know. The first thing that dawned on me was, could this just be a male genetic, disorder? And being that I knew nothing about it, and he tried to tell us and inform us of everything, and he was very good about it. But I prayed and hoped, could that just be, a male thing? And my sister, who also lives here, was diagnosed as well before me. So that kind of was like ruling everything out, saying, pretty sure, because, like the question you just asked, yes, it did for me describe a lot of things that happened my whole life that were very unexplainable and like very much a mystery to me, to doctors. I hate to say this, and I'm not saying anything bad about my family, but they thought I was a complete hypochondriac, a lot of my life. But being that my dad had such a quick and sudden death at the age of 49, I always erred on the side of caution, saying, well, could this happen to me? And the doctors always seemed to be pretty, against that. No, but I would still demand certain tests and do these crazy things, that, I remember my brother saying, Karen, you don't need to do those things. You don't need, and I'm not saying anything that it was it made me probably crazy at the time because I have high anxiety. And so it did fester. And, a lot of doctors would say, you have certain things such as fibromyalgia, or you have possibly rheumatoid arthritis, because of the joint pain. And So everything was a question. Well, what is it?
I relate so much to that because there was a lot of things that popped up here and there throughout my life before my diagnosis where I did the same thing, and I kind of for me, I kind of obsessed over it and had a lot of anxiety over it. Each time something new would pop up, I'm like, okay, which test do I need? Like, very obviously to me, somebody was missing something, but
Mm-hmm.
nobody would take it seriously. And they would just kind of like try to appease me by doing a test. And it was like, we'll just see. And then, of course, nothing was there because they never tested for VEDS. So, what other kind of things? You mentioned the rheumatoid, maybe rheumatoid arthritis because of joint pain. You were diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Like, what other kind of things did you go through prior to your diagnosis?
So I always suffered with chronic headaches. I wouldn't say migraines because at the time I didn't even know what a migraine really felt like. And then they would continue to get worse. For me, it was unstable joints too. So I had a lot of issues starting in like high school because I played sports. So, I mean, the average person that doesn't have VEDS probably could have had the similar, falls and whatnot. But I always seemed very clumsy as well. And constant, torn ligaments, stress fractured ankles. I mean, you name it. But the one thing that I will say that stands out the most is the bruising was always very prominent for me. And I would say, this is weird. I don't even remember hitting myself. Or the other component would be probably the blood vessels, like where if you would probably the average person would just hit their hand and be fine. Mine would be like a blown up balloon with, blue and all these other colors. And it was concerning. But again, not knowing, you just assume, okay, maybe I'm just a little more fragile than others. I would say, Katie, the other thing, a little bit, not a lot, but because I'm such a huge self critic, um, the veins, the visible veins, not my whole life, obviously, because it, gets a little bit more as we age. Um, it was always around, my chest area or my arms and stuff. And I would compare myself to the rest and say, this is interesting. Like, I don't look like my friend. I don't understand, but then I'd say, again, maybe this is just me. This is how I was born. Never once did I ever think that there was certain other issues, and I'm trying to, figure, looking back now that I didn't know, that I was later, found out along with just, everything else, but joint pain, all of that, some stomach issues and stuff, but I was later confirmed celiac. So I never knew about that. So had a lot of undiagnosed issues, thyroid, all these things that I never knew I had, along with major anxiety and depression.
Yeah. So, how did it feel getting that diagnosis of VEDS then when your test result came back?
Scary, very scary. I was at work that day and I'll never forget it at the time. I was at a finance company that I was working for, and our auditor was there of all days to get a call like that. And I went into the back office, and it was one of the geneticists that Michael, my brother, put me in touch with. And when she told me I was confirmed, I thought, like, it's like you see your whole like life flash before you. And, I certainly didn't look at it as a death sentence, but I will tell you one thing, Katie, right then thereafter, I didn't sleep for quite some time. I thought every night this was, and because of anxiety making it worse, it was tough. I mean, I I tried not to go on any, pages of Google or anything that was, encouraged to me. Um, but it explained a lot. So I know that that was sort of a relief in a way that I wasn't crazy.
Yeah.
All those 42 years of my life or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really feel that too. That was when I first got my diagnosis, it was devastating, but it was also this kind of relief that there was actually something there and I hadn't been obsessing over nothing or
Hmm.
anxious over nothing all of those years. So, how did you get through that period of time?
So, it was great to have obviously family support. Being that my sister here has it. my brother and his wife, they're great. And, they shortly thereafter did a lot of research, family history. And it's, very apparent in a lot of our family members that we did not know about, which is interesting. I had support, and I also, seeked it out, or sought it out, excuse me, from professionals, because I needed it. I needed to talk to somebody and really kind of get a handle on things, because it was for a little bit taking over. And I thought, you know what? This isn't a death sentence. This is something that I will learn how to live with, and I will be positive about, because, just like anybody else, we have to live each day to the fullest. And, we never know when it's our last turn, so I did, it kind of came in waves, I'll tell you that much, Katie, because after the diagnosis, I was, pretty much fine. And everything that was unexplained now was explained, because I was able to tell doctors what was going on. And then it was probably 2 years, it will be 2 years ago this October, that I had an incident where we're still trying to figure out what it exactly was. Initially, the emergency room thought it was just a kidney infarction, which is scary, obviously, and it was very scary. But still to this day, after, post scans and, the doctors aren't convinced that's what it was. So I'm still sort of scared that will happen again, because I don't want to go through that.
Can you describe what happened? What did you go through with that?
So the night before the day of me going to the emergency room, I was having pain in my stomach, but it was more like I felt like I was getting sick, like the flu, or, because of celiac, if I eat anything that's not agreeing with me, I'm in the bathroom and I'm not feeling good.
Yeah.
So I just chalked it up to that. And I thought, well, okay, this is going to be one of those nights. I did it to myself, but it wasn't. I woke up the next morning and I said, I don't feel right. And it was my bottom right area of where my abdomen is. And I couldn't get out of a hot bathtub because it was just so painful. And I thought, I need to go. And my boyfriend brought me to the doctor. I didn't even go to the ER at the time. And I just thought maybe kidney stone, I didn't know. And then she thought appendix. And then because of how miserable I was, she said, we can't wait to do a scan. And they know my history, of course. And so luckily they sent me right over, and it's across the street. And because of the diagnosis, I was seen right away, thank God. Now, it took a while to figure out. And, but they did scare me, because, emergency room doctors, he didn't really maybe understand EDS, VEDS all that much. And when he came in, he told me that I had a kidney infarction and possibly would need a stent and blood thinners. And that's how he described it to me. So I thought, okay, that was scary, and I thought, well, wait a minute. I don't even I didn't know which end was up at that time. And they, wanted to keep me for observation. I started to feel a little better, not great. But when they came in the next day, the vascular doctor came in the next day, and he was like, no, that's not the protocol that, we're going to use. I mean, they did an echocardiogram, they did all these tests, and I was released. And I had follow-up scans within, I guess it was so many months. And because of the way they describe an infarction, I don't know too much about it. The tissue basically dies, because I lost 50% blood flow at the time on the top right kidney. And I was told that the tissue dies, but that wasn't the case on this scan. It was resolving itself a little bit. So the doctor and my cardiologist, they weren't convinced that it was even VEDS related. So to this day, I don't know. And that's actually, that was sort of a bump in the road for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I felt like it was a repeat of all those 40, 3 years or however many years it was prior to my diagnosis. So I just had my repeat scans, yearly, and they were okay, which was exciting, but still confusing.
Yeah.
So I'm again, going back to what I said earlier, I try to stay positive, but I'm try to be very proactive as far as if, I ever have a pain like that again, I am not going to mess around with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds incredibly painful. Like, and very scary too, like not being able to get up out of the tub or anything. That
Mm-hmm.
sounds very scary.
It was.
So, how are you otherwise? Like so you've had scans since then, and prior to this too, like when you got your VEDS diagnosis, right? Like, is
Mm-hmm.
everything, or did it show any like prior dissections or anything that you didn't know about, or?
Never, not yet. Thank God.
That's
Nothing has
fantastic.
shown. It's good so far. And so I pray that continues. I do have the head and neck scan very soon here, and so that will be like the telltale, because I'm still getting migraines all the time. I mean, and those kind of things. It's just something, unfortunately, you just have to live with, and you know what you need to take to sort of get by, and you know.
Yeah. So I do know some other people I've talked to with VEDS who also get migraines. What are those like for you?
So mine are, I guess you would call them like cluster headaches, and they gather like on the either the right side of my head and um, or between the temples and the they're like tension headaches,
Mm-hmm.
um, or the top of my head. And sometimes I don't really know what what's causing them. I don't know if it's like stress. Um, I don't know what it is. I was recently put on some migraine meds from my primary care physician, which I was thankful for, because otherwise I wasn't getting by. I mean, I was missing work. I was, because they were that debilitating.
Yeah. So the medication seems to be helping
Oh,
a little
yes,
bit.
tremendously. And if it doesn't work, then I know it's not a migraine. It's got to be sinus related or.
Yeah. Well, it's really great to hear that like that's helping, and also that your scans, like I can't emphasize enough like how happy I feel for you that your scans were
Thank you.
all good. Like that is really fantastic, and hopefully that the kidney pain or whatever that was doesn't come back either.
I
But
appreciate that.
yeah, of course. So if you were giving advice to somebody else who is going through a diagnosis, maybe they're just now finding out that they have it, or they think that they have it. I mean, you've had your diagnosis for about 4 years now.
That's
What
right.
advice would you give them?
So the first part of what I would encourage them to do is not listen to anything that is not told to you by a doctor or geneticist that specializes in VEDS. Don't be Googling, don't be reading stuff that may not be true. I would also tell them to be proactive, speak with a geneticist, get a good vascular doctor, cardiologist, whatever it is that you need, be prepared. I would say, like I have done, I wear a bracelet. I keep with me in my purse all the time, the vascular card and, the information with what the syndrome is, and, have everything tied to my cell phone. I have, if I have to go to the hospital, hopefully that's not the case, then I have it laminated, telling the doctors what's going on in the event that, maybe, I couldn't speak for myself for whatever reason. Just be prepared, be proactive, and know your body, and, know the warning signs, so that you're not caught off guard, and that you know what's happening at the time. So, this is why we do these things. This is why we raise awareness.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm all about emergency preparedness. So your words like really ring true to me there. It sounds very similar to, I don't
Oh,
know. For me, it's and it might be the same for you, maybe a little different, but I feel like if I can prepare for as much as I can, and I have those kind of redundancies in place with the emergency card, with the bracelet, with stuff on my phone, then I've done like everything I can do, and then it's off my mind because I know what I'm going to do if something bad happens, and I can
That's
like
right.
live my day a little bit more freely without worrying about it so much.
That's exactly right. And it sort of, lifts that level of stress off of you so that you can live stress free.
Yeah, and that's so important. I mean, like VEDS is such a heavy diagnosis to carry alone, as well as all the anxiety and stuff that can come with it. So it is,
Hmm.
I think, super important to do as much as you can to minimize the
For
amount of
sure.
stress. Yeah. I wanted to ask you
Absolutely.
something earlier too. How does it feel knowing that you have family members with this? Like, I don't, and that's something I guess I'm curious about because I don't have family members. Like, I'm the only one in my family. But you had your dad pass away, and then you have several family members, including your brother, who are diagnosed. So how does that feel?
Oh, so it's interesting to use that word to start with because it's just amazing, I should say, to know that we've lived this, I mean, this long and not known about this. Um, because we do have several family members that are, second and third cousins that have had dissections and have had these issues that, I mean, they must have just been floored. What happened? Why is this going on? Maybe they thought, it was their father's history, or maybe they thought it was something like that. But I even recall my cardiologist seeing my sister and I for the first time. He even did it together. And he said, I'm really shocked to see, because my sister's 2 years my elder. He said, I'm shocked to see two women who are healthy this late in life in my office with VEDS. So it's interesting and shocking in that respect. It I do take comfort in knowing that we can lean on each other for support. My brother and his wife, she does not have VEDS, but being that she has a husband and son that have it, she has done so much research and so much for our family, which is fantastic, and I couldn't thank her enough. But because of that, because it's sometimes hard to live inside of the diagnosis. So I sometimes defer to her, and she knows sometimes more than I do. And it's amazing. And so with that being said, it's sort of like we're a team in that respect, which family is anyway. You hope
Yeah.
that we all are, but it certainly has brought us a lot closer. And it's certainly worried, made a lot of us worry a little more too, especially our mother. But
Yeah.
it's just knowledge is power, and you always find knowledge and power in numbers, and that's the way I look at it. And if there's any positivity in that, we all have our superpower, if that's a positive way of looking at it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing your story, and I really hope that, someone listening to this feels less alone in their diagnosis or in their story if they have a family member who's diagnosed. I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with everybody.
Well, Katie, I appreciate you, and thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening in today, and a huge thanks again to Karen for sharing her story on the podcast. I hope you all enjoy this show. I just love you all so much. I love this podcast, and I love all of you, and I know I sound like a broken record, but really, it would mean so much to me if you shared this show far and wide to help us raise awareness of VEDS. Thanks so much for doing that. Be sure to subscribe to the show and stay tuned for the next and final episode of this season on December 18th. We'll be talking to Christopher Underwood, a man with VEDS who lives in New York and wasn't diagnosed with VEDS until he was 52 years old. Thank you so much again, and I will see you soon.